Hi all, welcome back. It's Michael from God again. Here back to learn about training to become the most performant you. So today we're looking at the stimulus side of the equation, right? So we have the stimulus and then we have the adaptation and recovery side. Today we're looking at the stimulus. So basically training, exercise, whatever way you want to look at it. Today I would like to cover the main areas that we can train and the main ways to train them, right? And before we get into, exactly how you train and exactly how you do this, that, and the other, we want to understand in general, well, what are the things we want to train? What are the different systems we can develop? And what are the main ways we can develop them? Obviously, there is always more nuance to be had, but I think getting a general understanding is a good idea. Right, so first things first, the muscles. Commonly, one of the only places looked at for training. It is defined as a band or bundle of fibrous tissue in a human that has the ability to contract, producing movement in or maintaining the position of parts of the body. Right. Sounds really complicated. All it means is a muscle is something that uh, forces movement in the body somehow, right? So that is very important to be taken into consideration because then we understand that in order to train muscles, we generally want to move them through their range somehow, right? We want we want to move them. There is such a thing as isometric training, and it has definitely its specific uses, 100%. However, in general, the idea is for muscles, we want to move them through their ranges, and we'll get to exactly what range is in a little while. Okay, then second most common one, and if not for a lot of people, the first most common thing looked at is the cardiovascular system. All that is the system relating to the heart and blood vessels. So what that means is it is the system that controls your blood, that controls how your blood is moved around the body, the amount of blood that can be moved around the body, where the blood goes, and your heart and its speed. Often we look at how its ability to maximally contract and then its ability to contract for long periods of time. And so it's the heart, basically, the heart and all of the systems around it, right? Okay. Another, you know, very popular trained one is the respiratory system. These are the organs involved in breathing. So even there we have basically the lungs, the throat, a few different areas, the different parts of the lungs, but mainly we tend to look at the lungs. Even there we have, the capacity of the lungs, the ability to have to filtrate oxygen in the one go and filtrate all the air all in one go, and then we have its ability to do such a thing over time, right? As well as move nutrients into the blood, etc. But we can get to that again. And then we have a very important area to look at, which is an area we often get injured in, and those are the tendons and ligaments, right? The ligaments are a short band of tough, flexible, fibrous connective tissue which connects two bones or cartilages and holds together a joint. Basically, it is there. It's the ropes of the body, right? It is what holds the bones together. Okay, those are the ligaments. They don't get a lot of blood flow, hence why we get injured oftentimes, and we need to give them more time to develop and grow. Then we also have the tendons. Tendons, what they do is they connect the muscle to the bone, right? They're when you're really straining, when you're really trying to do that bicep curl in this case, right? And the tendon is what actually pulls the forearm towards me, right? The contraction is happening in the bicep. However, the tendon is what is attached between my bicep and the bone here actually that actually makes the muscle move, right? So it is very important to look at these, as whenever we are training our muscles, we are also training our tendons and ligaments. And given that muscles have a lot of blood vessels, right? The cardiovascular system is heavily involved within the muscles. They grow very fast, and we often pump loads of blood in them. And the tendons and ligaments actually have a lot less blood flow, given that they are not um, fibers that inherently contract in and of themselves. So we need to be a lot more careful with those, even though they are just as, if not more important, right? And we'll get to how to work on them as well, right? Then we kind of have two other areas. One is a nerve tissue. This is found in the brain, spinal cord, and the nerves, and it helps coordinate the body, right? It helps control the body, stimulate the contractions that are necessary within the muscles. And you know how you feel like if I feel like if I have my hands behind my back, I feel my hand. Well, that's nerves telling my brain, oh, somebody's touching you in the back. And you know how even when you're in complete pitch black at night and you go to the toilet, you still know where your body is in there, and you can feel, oh, I just lifted my leg. Sounds really complicated, but I just lifted my leg. Well, that is the nerves giving us feedback, right? So it is quite important. There are more uses, more things to be looked at as well in strength, and I'll get to that in a second. And finally, a kind of, it's not really a system to be looked at, but it's to be taken into consideration would be the cartilage. And that is basically, it's the cushion for a lot of your bones and joints, and it helps ease the movement, rather than having bone on bone. And there's also liquid in there, but that's too much detail for now. But basically, it is important to take into consideration the compression of cartilage and stuff like that, so that we can relieve the stress. Just like a spring, if you push down on it for too much, it can stay small. So sometimes we want to let it kind of breathe, basically. Right. So those are the main areas that we look at to train. Now, what are the main stimuli we give our body, right? Well, these are all related to the different areas within our body. So the most famous one, the one that everyone wants for the big muscles, would be hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is the excessive development of an organ or part. Notice that doesn't mean just the muscles. We can, in fact, hypertrophy our ligaments and tendons as well. Very importantly, we can hypertrophy different organs and everything as well, but very importantly, the ligaments and tendons, which means tendons and ligaments actually get stronger over time. So just as much as we break down the muscle when we go training, we also break down the tendons and ligaments, right? So we want to hypertrophy those too. In fact, there's a way to refer to it is, I want steel cables for tendons, for example. That means that no matter how much force you put through the muscle, you want those tendons to just be, really, really strong. And there are certain sports, for example, such as arm wrestling, where the strength of the tendons really, really matters, because the tendons can actually pick up a lot of the slack in the muscles. They are very, very strong tissue. So it is worthwhile focusing on, hypertrophying them, and also making sure loads of blood flows through them, because they do lack a certain amount of blood flow, and we want them to grow as well. But anyway, so hypertrophy is the growth of any organ. That could actually mean skin as well. And so calluses, I guess, could technically count as a form of hypertrophy of the skin. Then another famous one would be strength, and that is the capacity of an object to withstand great force and pressure. What that means is basically how much can you lift, right? What is your bench press? What is the maximal bench press? Notice that this is a different definition to hypertrophy. So yes, having big muscles really helps lift more weight, and there is a correlation there. However, that is not necessarily accurate, in the sense that oftentimes it is actually the quality of the nerve tissue that is improved when we stimulate strength gains. What that means is oftentimes you can get much stronger and stay the same size. Have you ever wondered how that guy who's really skinny can lift a ton of weight? Well, that has to do also with leverages, like the bone lengths and stuff like that. But it also may mean that he has focused on strength training, which means his nerve connective, like the way his nerve pathways go through the body, might be really efficient, which means he is very strong and doesn't need a lot of muscle. Now, hypertrophy does help strength, as in if I have more muscle, I have a higher capacity for strength, right? It means I can contract more because strength basically means the body is more efficient at telling the muscle fibers to fire. It'll fire more and more muscle fibers in the right order, right? That is strength. Then we have power as well, right? What that means is we might have big muscles, we might have a huge amount of strength, we might be able to, lift a ton of weight. We're very slow. Power is our ability to accelerate, right? It's our ability to take that heavy weight and move it really quickly, accelerate it from zero really, really quickly, right? And this is very important in sports like Olympic lifting or for sprinters or for very short distances. Very explosive athletes need a lot of power. However, there is another aspect we like to train, and that would be speed. There is a difference here. That is the ability to move quickly. And it sounds, okay, you said the ability to accelerate and the ability to move quickly. These are two different things. So the way that actually helped me understand it was look at a sprinter, right? I don't know, what does a sprinter run at? 30, 40 kilometers an hour. Let's stick with 30 just to keep it simple, right? They move at 30 kilometers an hour when they are at maximum speed, right? So their maximum speed is 30 kilometers an hour, okay? If you take two sprinters and they can both go at 30 kilometers an hour, that means they can achieve the same speed. However, one may be far more powerful than the other, which allows them to win the race. And what does that mean? That means that they can go from 0 to 30 kilometers an hour in, let's say, 3 seconds instead of the less powerful one who can get to the same speed, but it takes them 10 seconds to get to their top speed, right? While they both have the same speed, the more powerful one can get to that speed much faster, right? This applies in weights as well. So, for example, in Olympic weightlifting, if I can take a heavy weight, if I can move a weight really quickly, if I can lift it above my head really quickly, that might be fantastic. But I will lose to the person who maybe can move it even a little slower, but can generate much more acceleration, right? Because they have much more power. You want both, obviously, for these things. In fact, there are different strategies around them. Then we have another system. That would be endurance. That is our ability to sustain an effort over an extended period of time. So basically, I might be able to move 200 kilos once. Fantastic. Can you do it twice? Maybe. And that's still huge amounts of strength. However, in an endurance sport, for example, we are doing that constantly over and over and over. So oftentimes we are working way below our strength capacity, but we can hold it for extended periods of time. So for example, a marathon runner is a classic example of almost pure endurance. They could just go on forever. Now, each stride might not be very heavy, but your endurance is your ability to keep that going. So for example, there is a thing that's often referred to as muscular endurance or strength endurance, which is doing a strong thing and being able to do it for a good few repetitions. Honestly, you can look at it whatever way you want. Endurance means just being able to do it for a sustained amount of time, which means endurance is a range. One repetition is technically a certain amount of endurance, right? Because I can endure it for one repetition. I then have more endurance if I can do that, 2, 3, 4, 10, 15, 20, 30 times, or, an hour, whatever. In general, we start thinking about endurance once we start getting over certain points, but that is arbitrary as well. Endurance starts at doing it once, right? Then we have range. So for muscles, bones, connective tissue, we have ranges we can move them in, right? Well, not so much bones, but muscles, connective tissues in particular. So, for example, a big example would be having a massive range would be being able to do the splits or even the over splits. And that is having a huge range, right? That doesn't mean I'm strong in that range, and that is mobility, and we'll get to that one in a second. But if I have a huge range, then I can do the splits. If I have a very small range instead, I might only be able to walk. And then if I try to open my legs anymore, I just have a really, really hard time with it. Or, touching my toes, that's a pretty decent range. But then what if I can touch my fists, or I can touch there's people who can touch their nose to their toes, and that would be range. There is something to note. All of these systems are intertwined, and all of them can be combined, right, in a certain way. So, for example, there is flexibility, right, which is the ability to demonstrate a large amount of range. And then there is mobility, which is having strength in that range. So then I might be mobile in a certain range, but far more flexible than that. That can lead to some injuries as well, because if I'm in an area where I'm weak and I can't be strong in it, that's not necessarily a good thing. However, we do need more range so that we can increase our mobility. So mobility is the range in which we are strong, and flexibility is the range which we can access, right? So in short, there are different systems we can work on, and there are different ways we can work on them. Each of these systems interact with each other, so you're never really working on one or the other, and we will get into more depth for each of those systems. And then the ways we work on them interact with these systems differently. So for example, hypertrophy is mainly thought of as a muscle hypertrophy. However, you can hypertrophy the bone. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Shaolin monks or the other kind of monks. I can't remember exactly, but they like punch walls over and over and over, and they actually hypertrophy their knuckles. They make their bones bigger in their knuckles. They also flatten them out, and they desensitize their nerves, and that's a whole different story. But basically, we can take a lot of these. We can take those two sides, which are the systems and the qualities, and we can combine them in many different ways. And I think that is a whole video in itself. I hope it was useful to learn about some of these systems. And please subscribe to become the most performant you. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye bye.